Hello and welcome to The Chosen Generation. My name is Mudinda Mbebana. Today we look back to episodes that really stood out for us this season. Which one was your favorite episode? You can share your ideas with us on the hashtag TCGNSID. Would really like to hear which one stood out for you. The first episode we're going to start with today is Broken Families. I guess this really stood out for us because it's so many of us go through this kind of brokenness. And this was our response to that private, silent plea that many of us had about broken families. Let's watch this. I think the best place to start with this topic is to maybe look at a few definitions. I'll start with you, Belinda. What is a broken family? How would you define that?
A broken family is a family that has split or separated due to various reasons, such as divorce, abuse, neglect, or maybe even death.
I don't know, what do you think are some of the causes that can lead to a broken family?
So I think substance abuse can play quite a big role, as well as domestic violence and just conflict in general, but also emotionally detached family members as well.
Pastor Monet, so most males believe that if you grow up without a father figure, you tend to be weak. Is this true?
I believe it could be true in various circumstances. The original design of God was that there would be a father and a mother figure in a family. And due to the broken family scenarios that has just been sketched, that isn't always the case. So because of that, the children often grow up without a proper father figure and without the values that the father has been given to them. And that could lead to weakness. But I need to qualify that. It doesn't mean it will always, because one can still have other figures in your life which can play a role in helping you to understand what your role in society and as a father yourself should be. So in most cases it will be, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay. Angie, I would like to ask you, people tend to think that if you're not brought up with both parents in your house, that you are disobedient or you lack something because you're not in a complete family. How true is that?
A lot of people are raised in single families where there's no father, or there's only the father, which is quite a small amount. But most of the time, it's women that are single that are raising children. The bottom line about being raised by a single parent is that if this parent is focused on helping you from the brokenness she has experienced and brings you in and reins you in and has completed a cycle of counseling where her unfinished business from where she comes from, because single parents come from different environments. Sometimes it was a cultural marriage, she couldn't manage the culture of that family, she left. Sometimes it was gender-based violence like she mentioned. There's multiple issues. But who you are as a person, are you able to recognize the pain that you've gone through? And are you seeking help for it? And he also mentioned, Pastor, that there's different places where you can get help. It might be the church, it might be at a school, it might be that you have decided to study and you start bringing yourself back and you know that you can provide for your children. That gives you peace enough to know that I will forget about what I've messed up and I'll focus on giving my children the best that I've always wanted for myself. So you are relearning new values for yourself and creating them in the family. So some people that are raised in single parent families will definitely be losers because they take advantage, especially boy children where there's no father. They come with information from the street, they come and they start, when they become teenagers, they start questioning how you are directing the family. They also feel that they can be the father of the family. Sometimes a child will actually tell you, this is my house, I'm the father of the family. You know, I'll show you what to do, I know better. And as a parent, you need to surround yourself with good principled people that you can go to. You know, so don't isolate yourself because you feel like you are broken. In so many ways, our entire society, even the best from the best families, have a certain level of brokenness in them.
Pastor Monet, I would like to get your ideas on this. I think when I look at the Bible, I think there are many broken families, but the one that comes to mind is that of Abraham and, Hagar's baby. So I think this is the basis of my problem. I've spoken to many a young person, and they have lost their faith because that person, the elder or the deacon, is the one that beat up the mother, and that caused the broken family. And now they lose their faith completely. So maybe you can share your ideas on that. How can that young person find their way back to God when those role models that you spoke about earlier have disappointed them so much on the issue of their faith?
Yeah, so to answer the question in brief, the decision that Abraham made had a long-term impact on his family, and that impact is felt 3,000 plus years today. In the current conflict we have between Jews, Christians, and Muslims worldwide. And I use this just as an example how decisions that we make in terms of our family can have a long-term impact. I think that's an extreme example, but in our families there is definitely an impact, sometimes for 1 or 2 or 3 generations. And to that end, it's important that we make good, sound, solid relational decisions, even though it might not be good for us right now. We must look at the long-term consequences. But I think just the question to do with what is the impact of this on young people's faith and how they can restore that faith, that is difficult because when there is, let's call it, I know it's a strong word, but spiritual abuse, that is probably the most difficult abuse to eventually heal from. And I think the church has an important role to play to portray families and obviously the relationship of God with his people through families correctly. So that's the first part. But when that is not done, it is very difficult to then get to those young people and help them to understand that this image of God which you had through this unpleasant experience and reality is different. And I believe it can be done through having a consistent relationship with God. In other words, that our words and our actions, that they are
exemplary, if you like.
Exemplary, yes, yeah. And that there's no differentiation between the two. And I believe that's the answer. We must preach and live what we preach. There mustn't be that differentiation.
I think that's very interesting. I want to actually take it from that point and maybe bring the conversation to its end, like the gist, the point of this conversation. And that is, what do you do to try and mend the broken families when they come to you? What are the ideas that you share with them to try and assist them in getting over that brokenness?
Well, we would examine the family dynamics within the family and the household, and we would also value each family member's contribution. So even children who are younger, their contribution is still important and will still be considered. It's not the children are seen and not heard generation anymore. Children's views are very important. And we would look at the dynamics within the relationship in terms of communication, in terms of trust, in terms of the ability to maintain healthy relationships and connections. And then we would assist from that point in terms of identifying the strengths within the family as well and working with those. So there obviously will be weaknesses, but we will try and focus more on the strengths and how to get the family to work together and to communicate better and to understand one another so that there's a mutual understanding. And in that process, the family members must also all be committed to the restoration of the family.
Well, I hope God really mends our broken families. I really think that insert might have added so much value to the experience that you're going through. And yeah, may God really help us with this situation. You can share your ideas with us about what you thought about the insert. The hashtag is TCG on SID. We really love hearing from you. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to The Chosen Generation. We are still taking a look down memory lane to all the episodes that stood out for us. You can still share your ideas with us on which one really resonated with you. The hashtag is TCG on SID. We really love hearing from you. The next episode we're going to look at is the episode entitled Black Tax. I know this one many young professionals really enjoyed because it was really speaking to their situations with their families. Let's take a look and watch. I think I'll start with you, Sister Khomotso. Maybe you can tell us your experience with regards to Black Tax. What's your story?
I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have much of an experience. I think first we need to speak of Black Tax and define what it is. I think a lot of us are rather uncomfortable with the terms black and tax next to each other.
In fact, that's an oversight.
Right. But from the understanding in public opinion, I'd imagine from what I've learned about Black Tax, I haven't experienced it personally. But by extension, because we exist in communities, in our homes, we exist, we're not in isolation. At church, we've got parents, people would call parents, people would call grandparents. And if we were to go by biblical definition of who your parents are, there would be an element of tax, so to speak, in order to assist, support, to help wherever we can. So that's as far as my experience of Black Tax goes.
Advocate, before you spoke about, when we were speaking in the previous section, you were talking about the fact that, historically, Black people have been disadvantaged. And I know there's a time in your life when you're in a senior position where you could make such decisions. Do you think maybe even as a form of, trying to correct the wrongs of the past, that Black people should have a slightly higher percentage in their salaries so that we can also account for the fact that they also need to deal with many other unfortunate family members in their family structure?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The challenge you'd face with that is the whole notion of constitutional dispensation. And the question is whether that could be regarded as fair or unfair discrimination. And so it takes you into that realm. The challenge also with that is that not everyone who is Black has had to go through a similar experience or situation like that, and therefore to give out a blanket instruction or rather a regimen that seeks to cover everyone simply because they're Black with the same brush may not necessarily find favor, as it were. I think it suffices that Black people in the country have been, in South Africa that is, have been afforded somewhat of opportunities of advancement through affirmative action and other employment equity-related requirements or obligations. However, it doesn't really guarantee them much in terms of guaranteed jobs, guaranteed opportunity, etc. They still have to fend off and fight and compete amongst themselves, sometimes amongst their counterparts, of the other races. So you wouldn't really find favor with a notion that says give a little bit more for disadvantaged individuals, unless if it is established in a work situation that their Black people are actually paid less by virtue of them being Black. Then in those instances, there are certain obligations to actually correct those wrongs. And the Employment Equity Act, in fact, addresses that. The employer has got an obligation to remove any discriminatory practices in the workplace. And that's the only way in which you could then address the issues of equity and trying to balance it out.
This is a very heavy issue. Sometimes, because of your inability, because of the communication that you tell them, but I cannot afford this. Then there's anger at home, there are family meetings, you're even cursed. You're not gonna succeed. We're not gonna come to see your house or see your children. How do we deal with that stubbornness in some of our parents when we are honest about what we can really do for them?
Well, the easiest really answer is you give it all to God.
Okay.
If you know you've done your best, you've done your part, and you've been honest in doing your part, you've not cheated your way out in terms of the support that is needed. Sometimes we need to actually make a distinction between what is needed and wanted.
Okay.
Sometimes the fact that I drive a German car doesn't simply mean that you should also be having an expectation that you'll be given a German car because your son can afford it. Okay, it's not a need; it's a want. If I've been able to afford some kind of a decent vehicle to take you from point A to point B, that should be enough. You should be grateful for that. But there should never be an expectation. So the issue around meetings and the cases, etc., I mean, God says to Abraham, even if you cast, for as long as I've blessed you, that's enough. And therefore, I don't think that there should be any worrisomeness around the issue of being cast simply because people have got certain wants or demands upon you. But if you have done what is reasonably necessary to show your gratitude, to provide the support that is needed, and underline the word needed, and without having to be blackmailed into it, the Lord will bless you even if there is a mountain of curses that are held at you.
You heard it yourself. If I have a German machine, does not mean that someone must bully me to give them more money. What do you think about this? The hashtag TCG on SID, let us know what you think. We're going to a break, but we'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still watching The Chosen Generation. We're still going down memory lane, looking at all those episodes that stood out for us in this season. You can share your ideas with us, the hashtag TCG on SID. Let us know which one really stood out for you. It's now time for us to go into the next episode, and that's the one about special needs. I think it would have been really wrong of us if we did not include this one because it was so powerful. Let's look at this. Can you share your story about your experience, how it was and so forth, so that people can get context to the show, having a child who's got special needs and so forth?
All right, thank you so much for the question.
Yeah.
First, it was the realization that I have lost an able-bodied child, a child with no physical or cognitive fallouts. It came as a loss. I went through all the stages of grief after I had my son. In fact, the whole process. He was born with cerebral palsy, which we call CP. He was a spastic quad, and he lived up until he was almost 17 years. And I had to learn...
By the way, condolences for your loss.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I had to learn a lot of things. I decided I needed to understand my son's condition, so that I could be able to take care of him. I had to pray. I decided I needed God to guide me. I prayed a lot. I drew a lot of strength from God's word because that was the only way. I realized that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to raise him till the age that I could, or the age that I was actually able to raise him to. Because when he was born, doctors told us he wouldn't even live to see 10 years. But he went way beyond that, you know.
praise God.
So it was just all the grace of the Lord. And he provided for us along the way. I mean, the way we had a medical aid, you know, which most people don't have. But for us, we counted it as a blessing. You know, there were numerous doctor's visits. There were a lot of therapy appointments that we had to go through because of his condition, you know. And at some point in time, as a parent, because you realize your child cannot stand up for himself, he cannot speak for himself, then you decide, look, I'm going to stand my ground, advocate for this young man, and be his voice. You know, when people they look as if, or they pretend as if he is not there, I'm going to stand and say, hello, there is this young man, you know. So I had to just do that for him, you know.
You know, just sorry to interrupt there. You know, when you said the words that the birth of your son was a loss in the birth, that, I mean, I'm even shaking.
It's because
makes
I
me so
didn't
emotional.
expect that.
Yes,
you know, as a young mom, first-time mom, I expected, you know, that little one with 10 toes, 10 feet, everything normal, as we would say. And then there it is, something completely different.
Wow.
But you just have to embrace it.
Frank, as a youth leader, when you hear these things, we really need to, there's something that we must do as leaders. First thing that we must look at is addressing the attitudes that people have to people with special needs. What are your ideas on that? I have got like 3 questions. I've got a follow-up. I also want you to speak about how we need to reimagine the infrastructure of our churches, specifically for those who have special needs. Maybe if you can share a few ideas on the things that really need to change, like right now.
Yes, thank you for that question, Dinda. You know, the interesting thing is that as far back as 2008 in May, the government led in this particular perspective and changing the paradigm, because they included in the National Building Regulations and Building Standards new regulations, what we call now Part S, you know, which deals with specific requirements for designs for people with special needs. So that ranges through the whole category. The people are following behind, but I'm glad the government, as the highest body in the country, has led in that direction. It is so fundamental in regards to our country, because even now when you do a design, whether it's a building design, whatever, commercial, industrial, you need to factor in these requirements. Otherwise, your plans will not be approved. As a church now, we need to come back and say, okay, we have existing facilities or buildings that did not cater for these needs. And we need to redesign and reshape these spaces to cater for all these people. Because even in the constitution, by the way, of the country, we need to have equal access for every person for any building. So that's how deep it is in terms of the regulations and even the constitution of the country.
Ma'am Thuli, let me say, people just didn't know or they were not aware. And that's why these things happen, just to be on the good side. Man. How then can we raise awareness about these issues, particularly in the church, and maybe if you can give some ideas on how we should structure that awareness. What are the things that they must look at, and so forth and so forth.
Okay, so firstly, I'm just going to speak in the context of church. The first thing that we need to do, like Frank referred to access. The first thing, especially for people who are visiting, you know, have you heard stories where a person says, God guided me to come to this church. You know, there are people that come and we don't know and we didn't invite them, but the Holy Spirit invites them. So if it's a parent with a child with a special need, or a person already with a special need, the access is very important. In fact, signs and signage is very important, because from the outside of the church, a person on a wheelchair is able to see the sign that there is a demarcated parking space. If you do not have that, you are actually communicating to people with special needs that you don't have room for you here. So access and signage is very, very important, because they'll come, they'll never come back. You know, that's the first thing on the outside. And then ramps, things like ramps. Some churches will do a a slapdash work. They just, out of guilt, maybe they do a ramp, but there's no rails. How does a person who is walking on crutches hold on to? You need to hold on to something. So that's a visible access a thing that you can put to show that we are actually a friendly church to people with disability. Now, inside the church, you need to have a disability toilet, like what she's just referred to. That there was, because there's no disability toilet, the toilet is too small. A person with disability then is disabled by the fact that you did not provide these easy access things that are needing
Double
there. So
disability.
then, yes, then we want to pity them and we want to pick them up. We, now because you're feeling so guilty. But had you done it easy for them, enable them to be independently accessing the church, then there wouldn't be any need for us to then go like that. So it's things like that. And when you come into the church as well, your aisle, the size of the aisle needs to be wide enough to accommodate a wheelchair. The stage, if for instance some churches have got a pulpit, you go up the pulpit, there's steps, there's no ramp. So what are you saying? Are you saying a person who has a disability, a physical disability, you are not
Can never
allowed
preach.
to preach?
Yeah.
You are already communicating that without saying anything,
Yeah.
but just your structure.
And that's how we close the show for today. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed the package that we prepared for you today. And we encourage you at home to continue sharing your ideas with us on the hashtag TCG on SID. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, the SID Media on YouTube. And perhaps a final word from me. We really tried to uplift Christ through all the episodes, and I hope it was clear for all to see. He who saves, who sanctifies, and satisfies. We'll see you again in the next season. Goodbye.